Prime Minister Narendra Modi holds trilateral meeting with EU Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Evian, France. Boost to make in India's defence output reaches record levels. India's defence production hits an all-time high of 1.78 lakh crore. Defence production records 15.6% year-on-year growth. Two men hurl petrol bombs outside RSS office in Ranchi. BJP alleges larger conspiracy probe underway. Just 48 hours before deal signing, Trump takes a U-turn, says Iran MOU is not final, wants to go back to bombing Iran if he doesn't like the deal. Brent crude oil falls below $80 a barrel mark for the first time in 3 months following announcement of US-Iran peace deal. The Modi-Trump bilateral on the G7 sidelines is not just another diplomatic meeting. It comes at a time when the India-US relationship is visibly under strain. The old optics of bonhomie are missing. The larger question is, can India and the United States of America reset a relationship that has turned sour over tariffs, energy, maritime strikes, trade talks, and now symbolism over Indo-Pacific itself? The friction is not one-dimensional. Washington has pressured India over Russian oil. It has used tariffs as a leverage. A proposed trade deal remains stalled despite repeated rounds of talks. India has also been angered by the death of Indian seafarers and US strikes in the US region. Add to this is the repeated American commentary on the India's strategic choices, and New Delhi's message is clear. Partnership cannot come with pressure, public lectures, and disregard for Indian lives. The timing of America dropping Indo from the Indo-Pacific Command could not have been more sensitive. In 2018, adding Indo was seen as a strategic nod to India's rise and the importance of India in Asia. Now, reverting to Pacific Command may be described by Washington as a legacy move. But in New Delhi, it raises a hard question. Is India being symbolically downgraded in America's strategic imagination? And then comes the map controversy. The USPACOM website's area of responsibility showed Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir as part of Pakistan. For India, this is not a cartographic error, this is a sovereignty issue. Can a relationship built over 2 decades of strategic trust be reset by one bilateral meeting on the sidelines of the G7? Is it possible? Or has the damage already gone too deep? Because this is no longer just about one stalled trade deal. This is about tariffs. This is about Washington's repeated pressure on India over Russian oil. This is about Indian seafarers being killed in US strikes. This is about partnership where India is expected to stand with America. But America appears increasingly comfortable lecturing India. So my question is, can one meeting is enough for a reset? On this hour-long conversation, I'll be joined by a number of experts. I'm joined by Professor Swaran Singh. Subsequently, I'll be joined by Ambassador Veena Sikri. I'll also be joined by Manoj Kevalramani, Chair Indo-Pacific Studies at Takshashila Institute. Thank you so much. And Gerard Alfil, author and West Asia expert. Thank you all of you for joining me. Let me straight away go to Professor Swaran Singh first. Professor Swaran Singh, is reset possible?
I think reset would be far too optimistic in just one meeting. And this is not the only meeting President Trump is having or Prime Minister Modi is having in terms of bilaterals. And of course, they are also focusing on the G7 agenda. But no meeting is not as good as at least one meeting, or let's say one meeting is good than no meetings. And something of a positive spin should come from here. Particularly, we have noticed in whatever we have been able to see on television screens, Prime Minister's body language has been one of restraint and caution. And therefore, the bonhomie of earlier beer hugs was missing here, which is a signal very clearly that India would like to go forward and build relationship with the United States. But it cannot be the one which is dictated by the United States. It has to be mutually agreeable kind of a relationship on both sides. So definitely some, I think, momentum would hopefully become visible in bilateral conversations. And we know that USTR, United States Trade Representatives Delegation, is visiting India before end of this month, 23rd, 24th of June. So hopefully whatever little understanding arrives between two leaders should give a certain amount of boost to as far as the trade issues are concerned between two sides. Those are the most complex issues so far in last about 16 months that we have seen. Then there are a whole lot of other issues. I'm sure they'll be debating also or talking to each other how to deal with the situation in the Middle East. I think Friday and signing off that peace memorandum is obviously top on President Trump's mind right now. And whether India can in any way directly, indirectly contribute to opening of Strait of Hormuz or bringing stability in long-term basis in that region. Because if you remember, India was part of the quadrilateral of United States, Israel, UAE, and India. So United States recognizes India's credentials as far as ensuring stability in Middle East is concerned. But very quickly, I think the last moment, the changing of the name from Indo-Pacific to Pacific Command could be part of that maximum pressure strategy of President Trump before he meets Indian Prime Minister to create situation where he think he can bring about certain.
I think he went a little beyond that, Professor Swaran Singh. You know, the picture also shows Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir as part of Pakistan. But let me just go across to Manoj Kebul Ramani. Thank you, Manoj, for joining me. Your opening comments. And Manoj, can we go beyond the hugs and handshakes? What is the big picture you think can emerge in the bilateral that's going to take place in terms of net result?
Thank you so much, Karthikeya, for having me. Look, I think that we shouldn't be looking at this meeting as sort of achieving a breakthrough or achieving certain substantive outcomes. It's an important meeting at a time where the relationship between India and the United States has been going through severe strain. We seemingly overcame the trade tensions in January when the deal was announced, although final negotiations were still pending. And then you had the US Supreme Court cancelling the IEEPA tariffs, which led to also further discussions around the deal with India. And therefore, you've seen further delays also on both sides. But yet trade, if you see, trade has remained fairly okay. You know, the May figure also tells you that India is exporting over $8 billion worth of goods to the US. So I think trade has generally been okay. We seem to have crossed that friction on trade. But on strategic issues, I think this was something that began in May last year after Op Sindoor. The friction between India and the United States. And that seems to have persisted even during this conflict in West Asia between US and Iran. I think there are deeper ruptures that exist between the two sides. You know, there are deeper fissures. They're not into ruptures right now, but they are deeper fissures. The fact that the US CENTCOM took out an Iranian vessel in the Indian Ocean region is something that is a concern for India. The fact that Indian seafarers died in strikes by the United States is a concern for India. The fact that there is a shift that's taking place in American strategic posture and strategic geography. You talked about the Indo-Pacific Command being renamed to the Pacific Command. I see that as, you know, the US essentially saying that we need to delink the two theaters. That philosophy seems to have gone by the wayside, which I think has some impact on its perception of India's role in strategic architecture creation in this broader region, right? There seems to be some sense of shifting away from that. My last point is that if you look at Pete Hegseth's speech at the Shangri-La Dialogue last month, you see where he talks about India in that speech, and he basically talks about India being an anchor in South Asia and not in the Pacific as a whole. So I think that to me is a deeper structural shift that's taken place within this administration. Whether it survives this administration, we'll see. But I think that is a shift that's taken place. So to me, those are deeper fissures, which one meeting will not address. But it's good that the two leaders are meeting because the United States remains one of India's most important strategic partners.
Okay, Gerard, your opening comments, and thank you for joining me.
Good afternoon. Yes, I agree with my interlocutors that there are a number of points and of issues which have to be solved, and also that one meeting does not solve and cannot be the breakthrough in relation to trust. Prime Minister Modi said there has to be a new level of trust in bilateral and also in international relations. Definitely, we have to see one thing also now. And I agree also this was a bit of a cold atmosphere, not very warm-hearted atmosphere in Evian-les-Bains in Switzerland at the G7 meeting. The encounter between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Donald Trump. India has recently ordered for $25 billion military hardware from Russia. That includes S-400 anti-aircraft missiles and an upgrade for Sukhoi fighter aircraft, of course, also to counter military air power of Pakistan. And because of this, India was excluded from F-35 programs that they can import F-35 fifth generation fighter jets, the stealth fighters from the US. So I think India has already found its place in a new world order, which is, as the Canadian leader said in Switzerland, the G7 can no longer control the world. That's what the Canadian leader, Mr. Carney, said. The G7 can no longer control the world as it used to be. So Prime Minister Modi was invited last year at the military parade in Beijing. So there's also a rapprochement, a détente between India and China, which is an important piece to watch. I see the future world order in the triad between the US, Russia and China, and you have to choose between those sides. India, I think, is more and more aligning to Russia and China, and Europe becomes more and more an observer state, gets an observer status in the whole new setup.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll come back to all of you. It's time for a short break. Need to take it. It's important and mandatory in this program. But I'll come back, and my question would be, coming back to removal of Indo-Pacific, is it just coincidental or has it been done on purpose? But after a short break.
New Birla Opus paint protects your furniture against scratches. Who believes that?
I believe.
I do.
I do.
I do.
I do. I do.
I believe it too. New Birla Opus wood paint protects your furniture from scratches. That's why it's the new paint for a new era.
Ease of living, quality of life, हमारी सरकार की सर्वोच्च प्राथमिकताओं में से एक.
Ease of living means making life simpler, and it's an essential requirement for a happy life. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has worked towards fulfilling this need for the people of India. In the last 12 years, initiatives such as Digital India, Jan Dhan bank accounts, expansion of connectivity, better healthcare services, and tax relief for the middle class have made people's lives significantly easier. Today, every citizen across the country has access to banking services through their mobile phones. Financial assistance under government schemes is also being transferred directly into beneficiaries' bank accounts through direct benefit transfer. One of the biggest benefits for people has come from the world's most affordable internet services and the UPI cashless payment system.
सरकार को हम धन्यवाद, तहे दिल से धन्यवाद देना चाहेंगे कि सबसे बड़ी तो यही समस्या हमारी खत्म कर दी है, जो कि खुले पैसों की. जेब में मोबाइल है तो बहुत कुछ है. पूरे हिंदुस्तान के अंदर कहीं भी आप पेमेंट यहीं से बैठे बैठे भेज सकते हो, यानी कि आपकी जेब में बैंक पड़ा है.
The 1,155 kilometer long metro network across 26 cities. Along with this, 164 airports across the country are providing affordable air connectivity to smaller cities, improving living standards and creating new opportunities for growth and progress.
Your roots, dump in your bones, rose be your Amul doodh and go for gold. Aage aage बढ़ती है दौड़ती है दुनिया, Amul दूध पीती है दुनिया.
India's farmers form the strong foundation of the country's food security with their hard work and dedication. But when natural disasters destroy their efforts, it is not just the crop that is affected. The future of their families also comes under stress. In such times, to ensure that farmers' hopes remain alive and their confidence stays strong, the Government of India launched the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana.
प्रधानमंत्री फसल बीमा किसानों के लिए एक आपदा में, प्राकृतिक आपदा हो, ओले हो, पानी हो, अतिवृष्टि हो, उसमें बहुत बड़ी फायदा है।
In the direction of making farmers self-reliant and economically empowered, the Modi government has been taking more steps continuously. On one hand, schemes like soil health cards are helping farmers understand the quality and the nutrients of their soil. On the other hand, the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana has emerged as a safety shield for farmers against losses caused by natural calamities.
आज एक किसान सॉइल हेल्थ कार्ड्स की मदद से ये जान सकता है कि उसे क्या उगाना है। वो किसान क्रेडिट कार्ड का उपयोग करता है, वो प्रधानमंत्री फसल बीमा योजना के माध्यम से अपनी फसलों की सुरक्षा सुनिश्चित करता है।
Under the scheme, compensation amounts are being directly transferred into farmers' bank accounts through DBT or direct benefit transfer. In the last 12 years, claims worth more than 1.75 lakh crore have been settled under the scheme. Under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the agricultural sector has witnessed a new era of trust, security and modernization.
And welcome back. We were talking about the meeting which is going to take place between India and America in France, and I'm also joined by Ambassador Veena Sikri. Thank you, madam, so much for joining me. Let me begin with you. We were talking about this meeting that is going to take place, but the question was framed from the context of, the Indo-Pacific being dropped, Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir being shown, whether one meeting is enough for a reset or not. I want to go beyond, madam, hugs and handshakes. Actually, not at all interested in the hugs and handshake, but do you think that the differences between India and America have become systemic, huge, and very deep? One or two meetings are not enough to resolve them because they are at the level of confidence.
No, I think that, essentially the trust has to be rebuilt through such meetings. That's very essential because we've seen, as you said, that the last meeting was 16 months ago in February 2025. And after that, we've had the Operation Sindoor and the aftermath when, President Trump is claiming that he had a role to play. But our Prime Minister has made our position unequivocally clear through his statement in the Parliament. And that is the actual final word on what really happened. And then, of course, we've seen the role that Asim Munir is trying to play, Field Marshal Asim Munir, and the way it's being taken on by America in a big way. And certainly Asim Munir, in trying to control this narrative that he is doing in terms of the Iran peace deal, although even now he's been by the wayside and Qatar is the real person who has concluded this MOU. But even so, he's extracting his pound of flesh. And I can see that. I've seen that he's the influence on certain key aspects of what the State Department is putting out and what so on. You can see it very clearly. So keeping all this in mind, I think Prime Minister Modi is very, very correct. We saw yesterday the handshake was a firm handshake. Our Prime Minister looked President Donald Trump directly in the eye, as you're showing in the visuals, and it was a good handshake. And of course, in the end, it was President Trump who patted our Prime Minister, and almost like he wanted a hug. But I think even otherwise, they met during the photographs and all that. This meeting is going to be important in re-establishing trust. I think it's going to be a frank meeting. It's going to be a positive meeting. I think an outcome on the trade deal is very likely because the USTR, Jimmy Grierson, he's going to be in India very soon in the next few days. So I think a positive outcome in terms of the trade deal, or even what they describe as the first tranche of the trade deal, seems to be very likely. And that's something to go on because, the tariffs and the trade aspect was a big issue in India, and it has destroyed the positive way in which America was looked at in India. I think that's an important point for America to realize that the great positivity with which America was looked at in India has really weakened in the last 16 months because of the H-1B visa issue, because of the tariffs and individual exporters being affected. And now is the time to rebuild and reset. I think it will start tomorrow. Let's see whether there's going to be a visit by President Trump to India, whether the Quad is going to meet. All these are aspects.
Quad, you use the word Quad. I mean to say, after Manoj, after Indo-Pacific becoming Pacific and purposely showing Pakistan-Occupied Kashmir as part of Pakistan. I'm not even saying that they have put those stripes, which generally I recall in 1980s when magazines would come to India, they would paste a paper on it. You know, the Time magazine and Newsweek, you know, I would purchase a week old because sasta aata tha. So I would purchase that, you know, so that I can read it, and they would put those markers and there would be a line saying disputed. Not even that. They have, you know, it shows it as part of Pakistan. I don't think it's an oversight, Manoj.
So I think that image is actually old. It's from March because if you see the image still reads the name Indo-Pac-Com. It does not say Pacific Command. So I don't think this is something that was done immediately just to slight India. I think if there is a slight to be had, the slight has been there for a couple of months at the very least, right? So let's keep that in mind. On the broader issue of the Quad, look, I mean, I wanted to address one thing that was said earlier also, which is in this context. I don't think India is leaning towards China and Russia. I think the India-China relationship remains extremely tenuous and fragile. There's a very tenuous re-engagement that's taking place, which is sort of, you're taking baby steps. The India-Russia relationship remains deep. There's a lot of political trust and history. There's also a defense cooperation. There's an energy cooperation, and that remains there, right? Now, I don't also think that the world is sort of fragmenting into three different clear poles. Because I think that the United States is also engaging with Russia and China in very different ways than it has pre-Trump 2.0. So I think we're in a much more complex sort of world, and what India is doing, that it's engaging with all partners. In that, like I said, the US remains an important partner. What the Quad does, look, I think that there is some sort of a reassessment that's going on in the United States with regard to this conceptualization of the Indo-Pacific, which the Chinese saw as fundamentally threatening. And they seem to be making a concession to the Chinese at one level, but at the same time also rethinking, has the bet on having this as one joint strategic theater, the Pacific and the Indo theater as one, has that bet really worked? Have you been able to enlist India to work with you in architecture building and to work with you when it comes to your interests, which are, say, Taiwan, the first island chain, the second island chain? Perhaps not. And India has communicated that to the US, that India will do only so much when it comes to things east of the Malacca, particularly around Taiwan. On the other hand, you look at China, China's force capability has expanded monumentally over the last decade. China has 3 aircraft carriers, 2 of which are capable and are constantly simultaneously active within the Western Pacific, reaching the second island chain. So the US is looking at that and re-rationing its own resources and its own force capabilities. And I presume this renaming and rethinking has been going on for a while. If you saw when the Trump administration came to power, Hegseth and others were talking about the Pacific. Rubio and Elbridge Colby spoke about the Indo-Pacific. So this is a long-term debate that's been taking place within the United States about reprioritization of its own force structure given its changed interests and strategic environment. So I look at this in that context rather than simply from the perspective of a slide towards India or thinking about it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, let me then rephrase it for Professor Swaran Singh. Then where do we place ourselves in the so-called American or the US priority?
I think there is no doubt that India remains significant for United States, but we have to understand United States, particularly Donald Trump's foreign policy, either in terms of concessions to Xi Jinping or concessions to Asim Munir. But generally, we notice that Trump has been shrinking global engagement. His list of 65 forums and institutions where he wanted United States to walk away from, he's walking away from NATO and European security. At some stage after last year, August meeting with President Putin in Alaska, he was saying Europeans should co-opt Russia into G7 becoming G8 again to stabilize European security. So it's a general shrink of American footprint or responsibilities or global policing, in which case it could also be counted that he doesn't want to really get involved into larger littoral of Indo-Pacific, Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean, and is shrinking back to nearer home to the Pacific Ocean challenges, particularly as was mentioned, the China challenge and the wherewithal of China is increasingly tremendous. And therefore, they want to really make sure that their own immediate regions are secure. So it could be part of the larger reality, but I agree that this could also be some way of indicating something to the Indian leader or indicating something to Pakistani and Chinese leader. But as far as India's significance is concerned, I think that is not something that is going to go away, particularly when much of the world, particularly all his allies in Southeast Asia, West Asia, Europe, are fundamentally asking one simple question: how they can continuously try to reduce their dependence on United States, on whether it is security or development. And in that search or quest for alternatives is where I think India's strategic autonomy, thoughts right from independence, is something that provides a very interesting template. And many of these countries find India, the fact that India keeps getting invites to G7 is an understanding that India, being now the fastest growing among larger economies, a huge middle class which is desirous of consumption. Only last month we saw nearly 30% rise on year-to-year basis on sale of cars. Nearly 500,000 cars being sold in India last month. And obviously, these are technologies and products that developed nations want to find the opportunities and markets for. So India's attraction and usefulness for United States or for other developed countries is not going to go away. And India particularly is also connecting to the so-called middle-income countries and global South nations in that sense. So India is remaining significant, but I always say, as India begins to plan to become a 35 trillion economy, the kind of tensions and sort of confrontations with major economies is bound to happen. And therefore, I think this coexistence of cooperation and contestations is something that we witness now happening with United States.
Okay, Gerard, I know you're based out of Dubai. Do you think that the sort of gentle push from the G7 leaders in context of the war which is taking place will work on Trump? Because the first thing he said when he reached there was, "I'm the boss."
Well, and the wars, yes, that's what we are ardently hoping that this will happen this week, that the final agreements will happen tomorrow, as President Trump has announced. And going back to the aircraft carriers, the 3 aircraft carriers, it's true, China has 3, but the US still has 11. And the 3 Chinese aircraft carriers haven't seen the baptism of fire yet. So they are still definitely an overwhelming superpower of the US military hardware. And from the Europeans, they must now enter the wars. You must also speak about the war in Ukraine. From the Europeans, there has to also be shown the will to approach Russia, to negotiate with Russia, and to stop maybe announcing that the Ukraine war can last for many years more. So this will is still missing. But again, I can't see.
Gerard, what's the irony? Ukrainian war has lasted more than the World War I.
Lasted more than World War I, exactly. And this war against Iran was now going on for 3 months. And we ardently hope that there's a solution now. Going back to my stance here in Dubai, as you said, I live here in Dubai. I've been living in Dubai for 20 years. On the micro level, also, there's a growing rift between the US and India. I hear from a growing number of Indian nationals, non-resident Indians, NRIs, who live here in Dubai, but they have difficulties to get visas, travel visas to US and the European Union, Schengen visas, to both sides. And this is a new development. Normally, businessmen and travelers were quite at ease to get a visa to the Schengen room or for business purposes to the US. And more Indian friends and business partners tell me it's almost the doors are almost shut. So this is a complete new development. On the other side, Indian jewelry traders tell me that trade with China is warm and friendly, and business is business. They don't see any barriers in relation to doing business with China. 1.4 billion people on the one hand. On the other hand, this makes a big community. I think the path is set for a new Chinese Sino-Indian partnership. And President Trump has, of course, a history of ignoring facts on the map, going back to the Pakistan part of Kashmir, because the Golan Heights also he regarded as part of Israel, which no other country in the world has said that the occupied Golan is part of Israel, which the Israelis regard as their annexed part. So here's the new reality, and we have to deal with this.
Absolutely, very well said. Ambassador Sikri, do you think now the bilateral has started, the visuals have not come, do you think that from the Indian side, you have been part of the diplomatic corps, war can be picked up, discussed, because though it might not be directly between us and them, it has deeply impacted our agriculture sector, service sector, many other important infrastructure sector.
So, I think one of the most important aspects which our Prime Minister will surely focus on is India's policy of strategic autonomy and multi-alignment. So he will explain that. He will explain that how he is developing relations, whether it is with BRICS, whether it is separately with Russia and with China, with the EU, the free trade agreements important free trade agreements that India has concluded in the last 12 to 18 months. He will explain all this, that India wants to have good relations with USA, and we are going to work toward that. And we're very happy to have the trade deal concluded. The USTR is coming, and we certainly hope the trade deal will be concluded. But in the meanwhile, India is developing these relationships with other countries. Now, the energy security, when the Strait of Hormuz closed and India...
Ambassador Sikri, I have one side question, because I read a lot of editorials today, and at least 20 to 30% of them said, or were critical of this word multi-alignment, madam, which you used. They said, we use the word multi-alignment, but we have definitely taken a side in the war.
No, I think that in the war, no, I don't think...
It's just a question. I mean, they said we took a side on the side of UAE. We have taken a side of the Israel and America. And the argument was built on the response after the assassination of the top Iranian leader.
No, I think that, all that has been blown out of all proportion. Yes, our Prime Minister did visit Israel on the eve of the war, but I think that it is very clear that India's multi-alignment was to keep in touch with everybody. So he's met the President of UAE since then, he's been in touch with the Iranian leadership. Iran has allowed Indian ships to go out of the Strait of Hormuz as part of a very small group of 3 or 4 or 5 countries whose ships have been allowed to go. So it shows that India has its relationship with all sides. And when the energy crunch came, India has been able to diversify its energy supply chains, and 41 countries are now involved, including, of course, Venezuela and Brazil in Latin America, and many, many others. So we've demonstrated it's not just a word for us. I think we demonstrated that in practice. And in fact, despite the tariff pressure from America, India's exports have gone up, because we found other markets for those exports, and Indian exporters have not suffered that much. That, of course, they have. I mean, they've lost individuals, who are tied to the American market and so on. They are facing difficulty, but they've been able to readjust.
Okay.
So I think overall, this is what India is showing, and India does attach importance to the relationship with America. There's no doubt about it. We also attach importance to the relationship with Russia. President Putin was in India in December, and it was a very good visit. Very important. We're looking now, so many data centers.
Ambassador Sikri, I need to let go of Gerard. So let me take a closing comment from him from the West Asian perspective. And I don't use the word Middle East, sir. From the West Asian perspective, did we take a side? Did we look aligned? Did we look multi-aligned? Your thoughts?
That's a tough one, because India has also different relations with the different states here now in the Middle East, and West Asia, as you say, West Asia, it becomes more predominant because Middle East is an expression from the colonial time, and the countries here in the Gulf region, of course, they want stable, they want stability, they want to go back to business and trade. As long as the Strait of Hormuz question is not solved, there can't be any free flow of trade and oil, which has to come. Lower oil prices now in recent days indicate that the market knows something, that the deal is obviously in place. The low rupee, of course, is something to worry about for India. The purchasing power is reduced whenever the rupee falls further. But for the Gulf Arab states, it's of course a bargain, because they are all linked to the US dollar, except Kuwait, which is floating against the dinar, floating against the basket. But with a stronger dollar, the sheikhs and monarchs here in the Gulf region can buy more companies, can invest more in India, can invest also more into new trade flows, and which is good from the Gulf Arab perspective. India is an important partner, and it's an important workforce in all levels and across all sectors. And we have top Indian businesses here in West Asia, which are rather expanding their scope and their global stance from the West Asian centers than in the US, where it becomes more and more difficult to set up business and to grow your business.
Okay, thank you, Gerard, for joining me. It's time for a short break. I'll come back and we'll discuss other nuances of the bilateral that has started between India and America and France. Time for a short break.
आज सम्मान निधि की ये योजना देश के छोटे किसानों के लिए सामाजिक सुरक्षा का एक माध्यम बन गई। एक क्लिक से करोड़ों किसानों के बैंक खाते में सीधे पैसा जमा होता है। दुनिया के विकसित देशों में भी ऐसा संभव नहीं है।
When stories of transformation are rooted in the soil, they reflect a picture of prosperity like this. These are the prosperous and empowered farmers of New India. Behind the success of the country's food providers lies not just their hard work, but also impactful policies of the Government of India focused on farmers' welfare. In 2019, the PM Kisan Samman Nidhi scheme was launched to address the financial needs of the farmers across the country. Under this scheme, farmers receive financial assistance of 6,000 rupees every year, transferred directly into their bank accounts in 3 equal installments. The scheme has already seen the release of its 17th installment, continuing direct benefit support to millions of farmers.
प्रधानमंत्री किसान सम्मान योजना से गरीब किसानों के लिए बहुत ही लाभदायक यह योजना है। किसान सम्मान निधि योजना से मिलने से खाद या बीज सही समय में खरीद पाते हैं। इससे किसानों का बहुत ही भलाई एवं राहत मिल रहा है।
In 12 years of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's public service, India's agriculture sector has written a new chapter of growth. The vision of seed to market has transformed farmers from being just food providers into self-reliant, empowered entrepreneurs, giving them a new identity in a rapidly changing India.
Digital arrest, take part.
ये वारंट है, you are under
Digital arrest.
Cut.
Vigilante. Oh, vigilante.
ये है असली अरेस्ट. Digital arrest is 100% fake. It doesn't exist. Pause. Don't act. ऐसे और भी फ्रॉड की जानकारी के लिए विजिलेंटी को फॉलो करें।
मैं नरेंद्र दामोदर दास मोदी।
In 2014, Prime Minister Narendra Modi took charge of the country and gave citizens a strong vision. A vision to make India a developed nation powered by science and technology. Today, after 12 years, this resolve is increasingly turning into ground reality. The successful organization of India AI Impact Summit in the national capital, Delhi, earlier this February is an example of how India is no longer just adopting new technologies, but also playing a leading role in their development and in shaping the global direction of innovation.
भारत सबसे बड़े टेक टैलेंट पूल का केंद्र है। भारत नई टेक्नोलॉजी बनाता भी है और उसे अभूतपूर्व तेजी से अपनाता भी है।
Under the India AI mission, computing capacity of more than 38,000 GPUs has been made available in the country. Along with this, an investment of 10,372 crore is being made to strengthen the AI ecosystem.
We cannot allow the digital divide to become an AI divide. That means investing in compute infrastructure and connectivity. Google is establishing a full-stack AI hub, part of our $15 billion infrastructure investment in India.
During the 12-year tenure of Modi government, science has been made a cornerstone of nation building. Today, through AI, digital innovation and research-driven development, India is continuously strengthening its position on the global stage and enhancing its credibility worldwide.
So we were discussing the meeting that is taking place between the Indian Prime Minister and the President of the United States of America in France right now. I'm also joined by Ambassador Manju Seth. Thank you so much, madam, for joining me. So the other issue is it going to be a photo op? Is it going to be a sort of a substantive engagement between the two premiers? And if they are substantive, what will be the issues that might be taken up? Because it's only half an hour, madam. Ambassador said it's only the half an hour they have. That's the time.
Yeah, I think even if it's half an hour together, all the major points which are at the moment impacting our relationship or which are important for the bilateral relationship, I'm sure will be discussed, including, of course, the Iran peace deal. I'm sure will be discussed. West Asia will be discussed. Our concerns regarding freedom of navigation and the fact that civilians have been killed and 3 of our seafarers have been killed. I'm sure that will be also on the agenda. And also, of course, the unblocking of the Strait of Hormuz, which has impacted our economy, our energy, and energy security. So I think all that will be discussed. And of course, the strain in the relationship that has come about in the last few months, I think, may not be completely healed, should I say, between the two governments or between the two countries straight away. But I'm sure there will be a kind of recognition, at least, of the importance. But as always, while these talks are supposed to be held, the US is again, it removed Indo from the Indo-Pacific in their command, Pacific Command terminology, and they've also, issued some other maps, etc., the POK map, for instance. So I think all these pinpricks that they keep on and on, sort of letting out, I think are going to, not allow the relationship to be completely reset, I think. But yes, the strain, I think, will continue for some time. But I believe that the major issue that we're talking about is on, the July 24 deadline is being spoken about. For the agreement on the trade agreement, after which then another kind of tariff that will come in based on some what they call the 304 article or something like that. So if all this is going to continue like this, it's going to be very difficult for the relationship to get back to where it was. Given that the quirky nature of President Trump, and I don't know if it's completely quirky. I think there seems to be a method to the quirkiness, and I think they are deliberately trying to do this because they believe that that is in their best interest, and how to put India in a position of a weakness, a kind of weakening of India. They're trying to do that, constantly trying to to raise issues which they know that India is not happy with. And yes, there is absolutely a big trust deficit at the moment, and it will not be very easy to get back to the earlier situation unless President Trump believes or recognizes that India is important for the US as well.
No, that's a very fair point, Manoj. Prime Minister Modi tried to invest in Donald Trump as a person and an institution. That did not get reciprocated in the second term.
Yeah,
why?
And I think that it's something for Indian diplomacy to think about. That was personalistic diplomacy, had it run its course, and what are the assessments in November 2024 when Donald Trump won the presidential election? What are assessments and the confidence warranted? Did we genuinely understand the undercurrents of political change that had brought him back to power this time around as opposed to in 2016, 2017? And clearly the evidence is that we did not. To me, what that tells us is that across India, we have seen that the United States for the last 25 years has been one of our most important strategic partners. Yet we have underinvested in studying American domestic politics, studying how change takes place within American society, and what are the undercurrents over there. So to me, what that experience was that we had to realize that, look, there is much more that's happening in America that we are understanding, and we need to invest much more in that. And perhaps personalistic diplomacy has run its course because strategic fault lines and structural fault lines seem to be driving countries in different directions. And we need to account for that.
Ambassador Sikri, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I want to come in. I wanted to say that, look, you have to understand. I think it's very easy to criticize Indian diplomacy, but I want to say that the personal relationship plays its own role, and hardcore diplomacy in terms of economic, social, other aspects plays their own role. These complement each other. They strengthen each other, and that's what's happened. Let's understand one thing very clearly, that I know even the Indian community in America has been quite affected by the sudden rise of the MAGA community and its feeling and what they are now expressing against the Indians. But it's become very clear that in the second term, due to pressure from Israel directly on President Trump, his determination to go in for this war on Iran, he had already abrogated the JCPOA concluded in 2015 under Obama's time, and he was now determined to go in, and President and Prime Minister Netanyahu put so much pressure on him. We know all about that. And they decided to go in, even though there had been talks between Iran and USA on the 27th of February 2026. The Omani foreign minister is saying there's been a breakthrough in the talks, and he's talking about, and suddenly the war starts. So this is something that we know is a different aspect altogether. And they needed Pakistan for this, because Pakistan was housing American jets and also housing, of course, it turns out, Iranian jets as well. So, that two timing is something.
I think, Ambassador Sikri, it's also about a man. I was shocked today, the word which Trump used for former President Barack Obama. I can't even use it on air, SOB. And Ambassador Manju said he said it on air. I mean to say...
He has thrown all... sorry.
Yeah, I'm just saying that he said it on air. He said it. Made it a point.
He's thrown out all diplomatic niceties and, statesmanship-like qualities are just not his forte, I think. He just lashes out. He just speaks out whatever he wants. And I think in some ways maybe it's a reflection of the general American, level of discourse, and it's really surprising that as head of the most powerful country, he is given to these kind of this kind of language. I mean, all along we've seen how he has been talking even to Netanyahu, to other leaders, and the way he badmouths his friends and foes, let me put it. And he is constantly trying to undermine others, and trying to, in that context, to show how powerful he is and how all knowing he is, which is something which is very uncharacteristic of a statesman, of a leader of a country like the US.
Professor Swing, there's one more. Though I said I want to go beyond the hugs and the handshakes. There was no enthusiasm in G7 around Donald Trump this time. No one went to Trump out of the way, which was the case in previous years. Trying to mollycoddle him, talk to him, understand him. It was business as usual, not cold-shouldered, but no one went out of the way this time. Can you, sir, please unmute yourself?
Unmute.
So all of us are fundamentally, Karthikeya, saying that, to put it very politely, President Trump has a very unconventional way of conducting diplomacy. And, if you look at the way he's handled relationships with his predecessors, with his team members, with Netanyahu, with Justin Trudeau, with Macron, in that sense, his constant praise for Indian Prime Minister is not something that one should not underline. So we have escaped that kind of treatment so far in that sense. But I think that goes not just to Indian diplomacy, which definitely has made its own contributions to ensure that that kind of treatment doesn't come India's way. But the whole, I think the persona of India as a nation and how different countries wish to engage with India puts India in a different bracket in that sense. So not just that G7 was lukewarm towards President Trump, G7 itself was lukewarm in that sense. And there was no startling decisions to be made. This was increasingly being seen as a talking shop. And the fact that India is constantly being engaged by them, I wouldn't see it as something which is not to our credit. This is a recognition that they see India as a globally relevant country. And very quickly, in 10 to 15 seconds, you were mentioning earlier about India's strategic autonomy having come under question during the initial stages of Iran war. The very fact, as an academic, I would look at it, the fact that we call it strategic autonomy means tactically you can maneuver in one way or the other. And that's not only now. You remember, non-alignment was seen as too aligned to Soviet Union at one stage. Even now, we refuse to condemn Russia in Ukraine. So, the ideal type of neutrality or proactive neutrality is only theory. In practice, nations do, swing from one side to another, but you will obviously notice there's an attempt to balance in the follow-up weeks.
Fair point.
Fair
point. Fair point. We were seeing pro-Soviet Russia when we were talking about NAM. I understand that. Manoj, I'll come to you. I know you wanted to respond, but you also understand what mandatory breaks are in TV. I'll take that mandatory break and I'll come to you.
Any policy can succeed at the ground level only when it is backed by effective strategy, strong determination. The Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana of the Government of India stands as an example of such a well-executed decision, which was launched not only with strong leadership but also with a noble intent. With the objective of standing firmly with the needy and addressing their hardships, the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana was launched.
जब देशवासियों को सपोर्ट की सबसे ज्यादा जरूरत थी, तब प्रधानमंत्री गरीब कल्याण योजना यह मानवता को महत्व देने वाली, गरीब के घर में चूल्हा जलता रहे, इसलिए गरीब कल्याण योजना शुरू की।
Now, during COVID-19 pandemic, the Government of India spent more than 2 lakh crore to provide free ration to over 80 crore people across the country. Even during the difficult conditions of lockdown, it was ensured that no citizen in the country goes hungry. Even today, free ration continues to be provided to the needy under the scheme.
काफ़ी सालों से मिल रहा है ये राशन और अच्छा मिल रहा है, सही है। इससे बहुत जो है घर की दिक्कतें सही हैं और राशन हमको अच्छा मिल रहा है। 12 किलो चावल मिल रहा है, 8 किलो गेहूँ मिल रहा है, बहुत सही मिल रहा है।
In the last 12 years, the Modi government has fulfilled the vision of Annapurna Bharat, ensuring that no citizen of the country remains hungry. This is the strong foundation of a developed and self-reliant India.
Okay, welcome back. Manoj, you wanted to come in on this?
Yes, so I just had one brief point, which is, so while I think it's good that India is engaging with G7 countries and India is on this platform for a while now, I think it's important for us to keep in mind that increasingly India's economic future is linked to the West, and that is evident in terms of the kind of trade deals that the Indian government has struck over the last 4 or 5 years. We're increasingly leaning economically westward. Even our strategic partners increasingly are in the West. So as much as the G7 seems to have become somewhat irrelevant in terms of its comparative clout in the past, I think that it's important to keep in mind that the West, the geopolitical West, led by the United States, still controls the financial arteries of the global economic system. It still controls tremendous amount of capital when it comes to the high-end supply chain of high-end technology, right? The softwares, the LLMs, future of AI. You compare the US and China on some of those, and you will see a dramatic difference in terms of capital investment in US and AI compared to China. So I think we need to also temper some of our sense of what the G7 means to us and what the West means to us. Our economic future and our strategic interests still are very, very closely tied to them. Does that mean that we're going to get a free pass and it's going to be easygoing? Of course not, because the world has changed. We're in a world of strategic competition and economic statecraft, and it's going to be very, very challenging. But we still need to engage with these partners trust, the breakdown of trust creates problems, yet you need to engage with them. These are sort of ugly balances that countries will need to strike. And I think that's what Indian diplomacy has to deal with and is dealing with. To its credit, it has been dealing with that. But I think that's the kind of world that awaits us, which is fragmented, which is fractured, yet you need to be engaged because your interests are multifaceted, and still tremendous global arteries are controlled by the geopolitical West. So you need to work with them.
I'll take the closing comment from Ambassador Seth.
Absolutely, we can't, wish away, the fact that, yes, US still is the biggest power, is still in terms of technology, in terms of economy, military power, everything. It is still the biggest power. It is the number one power at the moment. Though, yes, a bit of decline is visible, but overall, it's the most powerful at the moment. China is the next in line economically, but in many other areas, it's not yet there. And Europe, of course, if you take a look at Europe as a whole, yes, their economy is good. It's a huge, together they are quite powerful. But again, they're also, the trust, especially the whole alliance, the transatlantic alliance has also come under strain. And Europe itself is also finding it, facing many challenges. And I think that but despite that, as rightly mentioned, it is very important for India to continue its engagement, to continue and to strengthen its partnerships with Europe and the US.
Ambassador Sikri, I think you wanted to say something.
I want to say that actually India is in the process of adjusting. I'm not saying that the West is going to give up its control over the levers of the financial markets and so on. But the ability of India to adjust is what is to be seen and supported. And secondly, India's leadership of the Global South. I think our Prime Minister's speech today in the outreach session was an excellent statement where he gave the message of inclusivity and saying don't have a issue. Okay, maybe the Global North thinks they have the money, but don't think that the Global South is inferior. Do it on equality and mutual benefit because the markets are in the Global South. And the Western countries, yes, they will be controlling the levers of these markets for some time to come. And India is adjusting to that. That's how we've been able to increase our exports despite the tariff imposed by the USA. So I think we have to appreciate that. And I think India's leadership of the Global South carries a very important message. And I hope that President Trump, during the meeting, will appreciate the message that it is a win-win situation if we work together. And the business of trying to insert Pakistan into the India-US relationship, that is not going to work.
Absolutely.
I think that message also will be strongly given.
Absolutely, but what is such an irony, madam, one former superpower and one current superpower, they are not being able to get out of the military quagmire. One in Ukraine and another in West Asia. That's the irony of the entire situation. And that affects the Global South, both Ukrainian theatre and the West Asian theatre. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining me on this conversation. But to my viewers, please don't go away. Because when I'm back, we will talk about an issue which is very, very important to India. What is happening to the opposition? Is BJP deliberately trying to eat into the space of the opposition? Or there's a flaw in which these regional parties are functioning? Dynastic, hence, a lot of fission is taking place. But that is going to be after a short break.